combination of what we're doing. So recently I came up with the idea that I would love to find people who are creatives in a lot of different industries and then try to see how many people we can bring together, whether it be actual painting artists, photographers, videographers, writers, authors, just all sorts of things. So for the very first Amici Creative, I'm extremely excited to welcome Kelly Springer, who is the author of her first novel, The Jim Show, which is absolutely spectacular.
Thank you.
And I have to say that I was laughing to myself when I have to do a disclaimer. Kelly and I have known each other for 24 years, somewhere around there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Before really children in our lives, but we were teachers together at School 31 in Annapolis Public Schools.
Were we pregnant at the same time?
I was no, you all were pregnant.
Yeah, I was really pregnant.
Yeah, because you were the only one when we did the urine test.
The Drano test.
The Drano test that Bob and Tom had.
And I was having a boy.
Yes, and you were supposedly having a boy, and it turned out to be
two girls.
Twin girls.
Twin girls. So
we were quite excited by that when we found out what you were having. No wonder the Drano test didn't work.
Yeah. Skewed.
So tell me a little bit. Why don't you give our audience, which could be one person, it could be thousands, millions, you never know. Tell me your background. Let's start with educational background, so people know.
I grew up in Pennsylvania, in a small town in western PA. I went 2 years at the University of South Carolina, where I had the time of my life, and then transferred to Penn State and graduated with a degree in education. That was 1985. There were no jobs in Pennsylvania. U.S. Steel had just pulled out of Pittsburgh. So I followed my sister to Indiana and
I didn't know that.
Lived with her for a few months and eventually began working at the Indianapolis Public Schools. And I was first at School 26, which is no longer a school, and stayed there for 5, 6 years, and then I taught 2 years at School 31 where I met you. Moved out into the suburbs and taught for Lawrence Township. Taught 8th grade language arts, and that was a blast.
How long did you do that?
I did that for 16 years, and then my last year of teaching, I was involuntarily transferred to elementary. So I felt like I had been demoted, and I taught 5th grade, and I loved the kids. They were so cute, but I hated the job.
Really?
I was exhausted.
Yeah.
I was working 12, 13, 14 hours a day and not even scratching the surface of what I needed to do. So I did what teachers are never supposed to do. I quit in the middle of the school year.
In the middle of the year?
Well, right before spring break.
Oh, you're kidding?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, and I told everybody I was going to go work for my husband. That was the story.
That was the story you created?
I had nothing lined up.
Just out of curiosity, because we know we have a lot of friends who are teachers and stuff, what did your principal say?
I really didn't care at that point. I don't think she was surprised. I went from, when I taught middle school, I went from being a lead teacher to being trusted with ideas and things I did with students, and having great relationships with principals and colleagues and parents, and especially kids, to having to ask permission to use the bathroom when I taught elementary school. I felt like I was being treated like a child, and I just...
It's a different experience. It surely is a different experience.
After being in middle school for so many years, going to back to elementary school. I started in elementary school.
Right.
And that was okay. But going back, it was torture. Torture.
So you leave school, leave teaching, and then how do we get to I'm an author?
Well, I've always wanted to write something, and I liked writing anything, whether it was a lesson plan or an essay or a letter to the editor or a scathing letter to the editor.
Even a lesson plan?
Even a lesson plan. I like writing.
Did you put little hearts and stuff on your lesson plan?
No, I didn't, but I
Okay.
tried to make them interesting.
Uh-huh.
I knew I wanted to write something, and so I began with what ended up being the prologue of the Jim show,
Okay.
and then I just sat on it for 2 years. And during that time, I actually got a job. I began working for a company based in Ohio, owned by a friend of mine from high school. And at first I was doing testing software, which I know nothing about. So the learning curve was pretty steep. And eventually I took over all their documentation. So every time they make an enhancement in their software or change something, I document it, and I keep up with all the application's user manuals. There are like 13 user manuals that I am currently in charge of.
Wow.
It's fun though. It's fun.
That's such a departure from...
It really is, and
everything
people
you were
wouldn't
doing.
think that there's a whole lot of creativity in play, but there actually
there
is. It's fun. I like formatting. It speaks to my need for having my ducks in a row, so to speak. And
speaks to your OCD?
a little bit. And so really, I didn't start writing the Jim show until September of 2013, and I finished before Halloween.
Wow.
I was hemorrhaging words.
Wow.
Yeah.
So to get into the actual story of the Jim show, when you said that you sat on the prologue for a while, what was it? I mean, not to give anything away, obviously, about the story, but a good portion of this is your life.
It is, or it was.
Right.
I thought that I was going to write about the actual Jim show, which was an institution at the high school where my mother was a teacher and my father was a principal. It was something that my mother had started, and it was essentially a gymnastics spectacle. Before gymnastics was what it is today.
Right.
Before it was highly competitive. She would put on a show with her students, and she included theatrics and music and dance, and it was unique because nothing in that small little town had ever taken place like the Jim show.
Right.
And she had brought that particular brand of herself and her creativity, she was a very creative person, to our little town of Linesville. And it was unique. No other school had that kind of program. So I thought I was going to write about that, but my plans were, I had whatever storyboard I came up with at the beginning was just
Blown apart.
I started writing about something else, but the Jim show remained the backdrop of the story.
Okay. So go through, because part of this, what I want it to be, is how creatives work. So what's your process of writing? When you, and now that you say that you wrote that quickly, I mean, that seems ungodly, is when I think about the book. What's your process for writing?
I thought about nothing else during that time, and the story was forming in my mind all the time. And because I work at a computer all day, when I get a thought, I can switch over to whatever I'm doing.
Got a little notepad.
And
Right.
put that
Sticky
down
note.
in writing or a sticky note or something, and then get back to work. And in the evening, I would put those thoughts together, and
I find that fascinating.
it just happened. It just happened.
Wow. Yeah. So, was there ever a time where you were writing and you were thinking to yourself like that you just either burst out laughing or had a good cry or?
Oh, there are things in the Jim show that I think are funny because some things actually happened, but
I'm dying to ask. I'll wait till we're off camera because I'm dying.
But no, I guess I approached the whole thing with what would have happened if such and such had taken place, or what would have happened if this person had done this at this time. So essentially, the Jim Show is an amalgamation of a ton of stories that my dad shared with me during his time on this earth. And
your dad was the principal.
And my dad was the principal, and the main character is based on my father. And then I really started thinking, what would my dad have done if he was faced with a similar situation like the Sandusky
so that
issue
was
at Penn State?
I'm glad you brought that up. So within that prologue, that's where we see that main character being very surprised by what's going on at Penn State and that whole
I remember watching that unfold and just being horrified. At first I thought, oh, this can't be, and then I thought, this is the beginning of the end of so much that's good about not only the football program at Penn State, but the university and the entire state. I guess you'd have to be from Pennsylvania to understand the connection that people living there have with Joe Paterno, and the feeling of loyalty that most of us have.
I'm not even from Pennsylvania. I'm from New Jersey, and I think probably because he was an old Italian man, it's what really bothered me.
Well, and there's a lot of New Jersey people who go to Penn State.
And I remember thinking to myself, regardless of what had happened, you know that there's a hierarchy in any large organization like that, and in my mind, all I kept thinking was, there's so many levels before Joe Paterno that he can't know everything that's going on every minute everywhere. And that was my, feeling of it, that I just felt like, yeah, he was the fall guy. And what a time to do it.
And our experience as teachers, we know with that hierarchy that you report, if you suspect abuse, you report it to your immediate supervisor, whether that's a guidance counselor or a principal. And then you're done.
You're done. You
By
don't know
law,
where it goes from there.
You don't have any control over what happens with that information. And I'm not so sure that wasn't the case with Joe Paterno. He did report it. What happened after that is out of his hands. And I think that the NCAA sanctions and just the general fallout and the fact that it really killed him. He did. He died of a broken heart. So that was preying on my mind. I thought, what would my dad have done in a similar situation? And that's how the story unfolded.
Yeah, and what a great, I have to say, I downloaded it after you posted and whatever, I downloaded it on my iPad and started reading out in Arizona and couldn't stop myself. I stopped eating pee. That was, seriously, that's what I did. And I just fell in love with it. I loved and I think people who are, there's a lot of different age groups that are going to love it for a lot of different reasons. But I think for me personally, being born in the 60s and some of the things that you wrote about, clicked in my mind as far as experiences that I had, same type of thing. Growing up in that time period.
And I tried to grab some real life placeholders for that time period and put them in the book so that, I mentioned TV shows that were on or songs that were popular or, fashions. And one of my characters in the book is actually quite fashionable. And I had a lot of fun with her. But she was completely made up. I didn't know anybody.
Oh, really?
Well, I just pulled from different places and just put her all together.
What kind of response have you gotten from Western Pennsylvania?
I have to tell you that the fictional town of Mercyville and the real town of Linesville are very similar. And the people from the real town of Linesville, Pennsylvania have been overwhelmingly excited, supportive, happy, crying tears of joy. I've heard from people that I haven't heard from in decades.
Right.
People who knew my parents,
Right.
people older than me who knew my parents, people who worked with my parents, teachers that I had while I was at school there. It's just been, it's been great. And apparently the high school where this all takes place is now has now consolidated with 2 other schools, so it's not really the same school.
Same school, yeah.
But I spoke with the secretary there, who told me that the staff could talk of nothing else but the plot of the story, and
That's
wondering,
so cool.
did this really happen? Did all these things happen? And like,
Are they going looking?
Yes, they were.
Yes,
Yes, they were. They were looking
Uh-huh.
for particular things,
Yeah.
and she assured them that no, it is a work of fiction. And
Right. Close to that question, but did what do you what do you think your parents would think of the book? Because you lost your mom pretty young.
I lost my mother when I was 11. She was 40. My father died in 1996. I think they would be thrilled. I really do.
Yeah.
I think, to borrow one of my mother's phrases, she would be tickled pink. And my dad, I think he would be very proud. Based on what my family has, the feedback that I've gotten from my family. My sister said she bawled her eyes out when she finished reading it, and she is not a reader. That when she finished, she just said, "Jim Adamson is my hero."
Oh, that's
and
so sweet.
My niece just finished the book yesterday and was overwhelmed.
Yeah, that must be a great, just a wonderful tribute to your parents. And
I think so.
Yeah, I think
They were pretty remarkable people.
Yeah, it was interesting because yesterday when I was before we. I was trying to think about my interviewing skills. I don't do this, but whatever.
You're doing great.
Oh, thanks. I was watching a interview, one of the last interviews Oprah did with J.K. Rowling.
Oh.
And it's fascinating to watch. It was like an hour-long special. We're not going to go an hour. But it was like an hour-long special. But when her mom had passed away about 6 months after she started writing Harry Potter. And her biggest regret was that she never told, she had started the story, but she had never said to her mom, here's what I'm doing. She goes, it's one of my biggest regrets. She said, however, she doesn't feel Harry Potter would ever have happened if her mother had lived.
Oh, I think that about a lot of things in my life. And about a lot of things in my brother's life and my sister's life. I think that her death when we were so young changed us, and it was tragic and terrible, but we are the people we are today because of it. So that's how God works.
Right. And I was watching, when I was watching that yesterday, I kept thinking to myself, my dad passed away when we were, I was 19, and my younger brother was almost 17 at the time, and it had just on each of my 3 brothers and myself, it just had such a profound impact, but different impact because of how old we were, where we were in the stages of our life, and where it led us to. But I truly believe that it made me the person, maybe a heck of a lot stronger at 19 than I ever thought I could be.
I think the only downside of losing my mother so young was that I had a completely different upbringing than my own children, and I had no template. I had nothing. Well, when I was, you're right, I didn't talk to my mother. I didn't talk to my mother at all. Yeah. So I wasn't quite sure what direction to take. Hopefully, I took the right direction with my kids, but that's probably been the hardest thing. Yeah.
So I know it's been asked too many times of you already, but is there another book in the works for you?
Absolutely.
Oh, good. Actually, I'm so excited.
Oh, yeah. And it's completely different from the Jim show. It features a young teacher set in the 80s.
Do you know a few things about that?
I know a few things about teaching. You're told to write about what you know. I know teaching. And this will be quite different, but...
Will there be anything about Common Core in there?
No, no.
It's the 1980s.
I Step, the beginning of I Step in Indiana. What
you go from here after writing and the Jim show? I mean, you know, there should be a national tour of the Jim show.
I think there should be a movie.
And do you, I think I know a couple of filmmakers.
I would be happy to write a script.
I think that's a great idea. I'm just wondering whether or not, you know, I really, honestly, I want to end it by saying that when I read it, the very first thing I thought was, and I could care less which people see this or whatever, I was like, holy shit, who knew that Kelly could write like that? I mean, I was just like, holy Toledo. I'm fascinated by the whole,
That's funny that you said that because...
not that I didn't think you're a smart person, but I'm just like, I'm in awe of people who write the way you do, and I've read some books that I thought were crappy, and I seriously, when I started reading it, I thought, oh, okay, Kelly wrote a book. I'm like, whatever.
I think that's what everybody's thinking.
And then I read it, and I'm like, holy shit, Kel, it's like really, I mean, I'm not just, it is really, really good, and just, there were some things that I just found myself, and I'm reading it by myself at home, I burst out laughing, was howling. And just, or things that, happened in the book and I thought, or knowing that it was based on your dad, I was like, oh my, the anguish of knowing what that's like to be in a position like that and having to figure out what do I do and where do I go?
Well, it's funny that you said you were surprised that, wow.
The holy shit.
I have a sister-in-law, dear sister-in-law, who lives in Oregon, and hi, Cheryl. She's a very devout Christian, and when she said that she was going to read the book, I warned her that some of the language is a bit salty, but non-gratuitous. I mean, that's what the character would have done.
Right.
And my husband's side of the family they're quite conservative when it comes to language and certain ideas, and that's great. Well, she read the book and she said, I wasn't real happy about the language, but I had no idea you could write like that. Yeah, so I was kind of tickled about that.
Well, I find myself, and everybody has different, pluses and minuses about themselves. And one of the things that I feel that I do with my blog and stuff is I try to write from the heart. However, I find myself on many occasions going to, like, oh wait, do I need a comma there? Do I need it? And double checking things like that simply. And I just thought to myself, after reading how well it's put together, I kept thinking to myself, damn, she's really good at this. I mean,
I did teach English in the middle school.
Yeah.
I would like to think that I'm good at putting sentences together, although I did have, in the final analysis, I did have help from a friend, Karen Runkle, who I taught with at Fall Creek Valley. She is a master grammarian, and her punctuation prowess is unparalleled. So
I didn't even know there was a word grammarian, Kelly.
There is now. And when you write a book, you can make up your own words.
You can make up your own words.
Again.
J.K. Rowling said that too.
There you go.
She loves fun words.
I do too.
Yeah. Well, I think it's absolutely fabulous. So, and where can people find the Jim show?
They can find it on Amazon in both paperback form and in Kindle. They can find it on their Nook. They go to Barnes & Noble. And I just published yesterday on Smashwords. So I believe with Smashwords, though I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that's downloadable onto iTunes.
Oh, really?
Yes. So it's downloadable on more formats, and it's cheaper. So
well,
I'm very excited about that.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea that it's that it's starting to expand to, and this is kind of interesting because you saw this yesterday, because when I posted that we were going to do this interview, the interesting part is the woman who responded to that Facebook post, Merle Jean. Hi, Merle Jean. She was our backyard neighbor. So when I looked out my back window, there was Mrs. Albert's house.
Okay.
And now they live down in either South Carolina, I think South Carolina. But anyway, there were certain things that you wrote in the book, and I was laughing to myself, thinking about running around our backyard and their backyard and things like that. I grew up with her boys, and just, it's interesting how the internet works. And she immediately said, oh, I just went and bought it. That to me is fascinating, you know, that things can happen that way. And so I encourage anybody who would love a great read that...
It is a good read. And I've just heard nothing but good things from people, which may be because they're telling me and I'm the one that wrote the book, but I think it's a great story.
Yeah, well, you know, we may be good friends and all, but however, I would never want to do this interview if I thought it was crap.
Well, I have, my sister Becky is the most honest person on the planet. And if she doesn't like something, she will tell you. She couldn't tell a lie if somebody put a gun to her head. And she loved it. So once I had her endorsement, I'm golden.
And then I'll tell this last story before we finish, but the last time I saw Becky, or the only time I saw Becky, was at your house. And Kelly had just delivered twins. You had just had twins. And you were home. It was like day 5. And I called you just to see how you were doing. You were, I can't even take a shower.
That was the worst.
And I hopped in my car and came to your house so you could go take a shower, and then your sister Becky came over.
Do you know why she came over? Because I called her and told her to come get them.
Please take these girls.
I didn't know what to do. I was so overwhelmed. I had no idea how overwhelmed I would be with twins.
Well, I know how overwhelmed I was with one, so I can't even fathom.
I probably was suffering from horrible postpartum depression, but I do remember calling her and saying, do you want a twin? Just come over here and get them. They're yours. And she goes, I'll be right over. So yeah, I relied on the help of many people during those first few months. So thank you.
You're very welcome. So pick up the Jim show, and our next person to be interviewed, I have no idea who it's going to be, but we have 5 or 6 people waiting in the wings over the next couple of weeks. So Kelly, I'm so excited for you. I love the Jim show. It was fabulous, and I'm so happy that I get to see you.
I am too.
And I'm looking forward to whatever the next book is.
Thank you very much.
All right.
I'll get busy on it.
Yeah.